me to make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with a panel of bloggers and opinion shapers. Joining me tonight, he is the leader of the Conservative Party, the ever satirical Colin Craig, and he is the Associate Professor at the School of Communication Studies at AUT Media Oracle, Dr. Wayne Hope. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, is John Key really like Robert Muldoon, or is Russell Norman being overtly dramatic? Issue 2, what's worse for education, charter schools or Nova Pay? And issue 3 tonight, why is Winston Peters attacking Peter Dunn? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. At the Green Party AGM last week, Russell Norman compared John Key to our most divisive Prime Minister ever, Sir Robert Muldoon. Media pundits have been quick to mock the comparison by pointing out Norman was only 9 years old and living in Australia when Muldoon last ruled New Zealand with an iron fist. So, is the comparison fair, or is Norman over-egging it? Colin, is this far-left scaremongering and a desperate attempt to smear one of our most popular Prime Ministers in recent political history, or is there some truth in the comparison?
Well, look, there's always some truth in comparisons, but let's face it, they're very different individuals. I don't think anyone's going to imagine for a moment John Key's going to go and get tanked up on alcohol and call a snap election. Not going to happen. Very different people. Some similarities. I mean, I'm obviously a fiscal conservative. You're talking about two people who both have borrowed a huge amount of money. So on that, getting New Zealand into debt, I remember we had to pay the price to get out of Muldoon's little big borrowing scheme. I wonder what the cost's going to be to get out of John Key's big borrowing scheme.
Are you concerned as a fiscal conservative over the almost $60 billion that the government has borrowed over the last 5 years?
This is it. And John Key has, if you like, repeated what Robert Muldoon did. Let's borrow big and hope that it'll work out. I think there's a similarity there and a dangerous one.
Wayne, Robert Muldoon was, of course, an expert at dividing New Zealand, the Springbok tour being the most obvious example. Can the exact same case be made of the manner in which Key has savagely targeted those on welfare?
I think the best comparison, if you really want to go with Russell Norman's argument, is to do a checklist for each politician in terms of how anti-democratic Muldoon was compared to how anti-democratic Key is. And I think it's a draw. On the Muldoon side, you've got him combining the two portfolios of finance and the Prime Minister, ruthlessly exploiting the hierarchies of the Westminster system, so that if the Cabinet dominates the Parliament, you dominate the Parliament, then his faction dominates the Cabinet. So he's basically, a very populist authoritarian leader. Yep. He passed the SIS Act and spied on a lot of protesters. Well, that's happening now a little bit too, isn't it?
Yep, okay.
So Muldoon's got a pretty good track record, but look at Key, he's right up there. And we have a look at ECAN was dissolved. We look at the draconian power that Wellington is exerting over Auckland. We look at the casino deal and how it binds future parliaments to that deal. I could go on. I mean, the weakening of the Resource Management Act and a double standard on the electoral mandate. On the one hand, Key's arguing that we have a mandate for partial privatisation, but on the other hand, if another group of parties has a mandate for setting up a new electricity pricing scheme, then somehow they're not allowed to do that. So you stack it up, and I reckon it's about a 5-all draw.
Do you think that Key is more sophisticated in his messaging? I mean, when he's put into a tough position, he shrugs, he smiles, and says, "I'm comfortable with that," and that is quite reassuring. Whereas, of course, Muldoon was quite obvious and overt about his power. Is that the difference?
That is the difference. Muldoon was perfect for his time. He was the first major politician to master television, to stare down the camera and get the people on his side, as he put it. That kind of populist, well, maybe demagoguery is too strong, that kind of strong populist use of the media and the intimidating style he operated on an interpersonal basis doesn't quite cut it today. It is more sophisticated. But the circumvention of democracy doesn't require a front-on attack. It can happen in quite manipulative ways. I mean, you take a close look at that casino deal. Yeah. I mean, that's as anti-democratic as anything that Muldoon ever did.
Colin, the 270,000 kids living in poverty and the tens of thousands of beneficiaries who have been disqualified under national may never have known Muldoon, but they fear Keir in the exact same way, don't they? There is
Well,
a lot
look,
of fear within the beneficiary community.
I don't know that it's fair, but I think there is a point around this democracy and the removal of democratic checks. I mean, look at the inability now to question support for caregivers through the courts. I mean, this is the sort of thing that doesn't bode well for anybody wanting to challenge what the government might currently want to do as policy. I think most people know we're a party that's got binding referendum at the core of our principles and policies, and this is one reason why. I think there's a danger in New Zealand you can be hijacked, because Parliament's all there is right now. That's supreme. You get a convincing or conniving leader in there who's got the party in tow, who's got coalition partners who have checked their brains out, given them a blank check. You can actually do pretty much anything.
That's right.
And I think that's a real danger. Urgency's been used more than ever before. Those sorts of things I think are problematic, and it avoids debate around some of these
Was you
issues.
there because we do have one of the most powerful parliaments in the Westminster system, because we just have one chamber and it goes straight through.
That's it.
And you can read a bill straight into law if you want. Do you disagree then with the idea of a 4-year term? Because I mean, giving that amount of unchecked
I like the idea of a 4-year term. I think we should go there, but I think we go there with the caveat or the proviso that we have some sort of binding referenda where citizens can call it a halt to something the government's doing. Like, for example, sale of state assets. Right now, no, there weren't enough signatures on the petition that the Greens were and Labor were pushing through. If it had been binding, I am sure there would have been. People would have said, oh, well, it's going to count, now I'll participate. So I think we must see some change to reduce the potential for the Muldoons and others who want to be very autocratic and take total control.
Wayne, doesn't the wave of racism justification in the wake of the Al Nisbet cartoons prove just how successful Keir has been in generating those divisions against those on welfare?
Oh yeah, and it's not necessarily racial either, the way he's doing it. It's that whole divide between we are the taxpayers and you are the beneficiaries. And somehow the beneficiary category means you're less of a citizen than if you're a taxpayer.
Yeah.
Now, National Party has played that game for years. It was played at its strongest under the Shipley and Ruth Richardson regime when Bolger was Prime Minister. Muldoon used to do it as well, but hey, Muldoon was in favour of a progressive tax system.
Right.
Muldoon did not roll back the welfare state in the same way that Roger Douglas did or Ruth Richardson did. So although that demonisation of beneficiaries did occur under Muldoon, the structural attack on beneficiaries' living standards is actually far more extreme.
Was that because Muldoon still reaped a lot of vote from that constituency, that he wouldn't put it at risk?
Yeah, well, yeah, in those days, in the 70s, he got support from a lot of working class Tories.
Right.
In the
two Bob Tories, that was the idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're going to structurally undermine their living standards, they're not going to vote for you.
Right.
And in the 75 campaign, when a landslide to Labor was shifted to a landslide for National, and that famous Wirrie Wool store meeting, thousands and thousands of people turned up. Now, Wirrie's in South Auckland, right? So Muldoon knew which way his bread was buttered on.
There were a lot less beneficiaries. In reality, when Muldoon was there, right? You know, there are now significantly more.
Yeah.
And so I think the comparison's a bit tough, because who knows what Muldoon would have been like had he had a much bigger fiscal amount to deal with in terms of what was being paid out to beneficiaries.
Final question to both of you on this. Has the comparison hurt Russell Norman? He's got a lot of criticism from the punditry, or strengthened the Greens?
Oh, time will tell. I don't think it can hurt them. It's publicity, and it's hitting at Keir's credibility, and I think he's been the most popular PM, and if you want to undermine that, which Norman does, then he's going to have to start making these sorts of calls.
Oh, I think it's a very shrewd move, actually, because it means that you can't be associated with Muldoon if you want interventionist policies yourself.
Right.
Because Muldoon was demonised in the 80s. If there had been global warming back then, he would have been blamed for that as well. So Norman's been very shrewd in not wanting that to happen. He's also just acting like an oppositional leader should. Have you noticed robust criticism of the government of the same scale and intellect coming from Mr Shearer?
And why is that? Why have we not seen that? Is David Shearer still on holiday? What's going on there?
Oh, he doesn't have the intellect to muster up these arguments. One other thing, one other similarity.
you want to throw another one in there.
I think that's a hard call.
Cronyism.
Yes.
Now, Muldoon had his own political cronies in cabinet. the 75 cabinet was probably the least intelligent in New Zealand history, because
Yep.
it's all Muldoon's mates, the Allens and the Macreadys and the Gills. But hey, Key has a different kind of cronyism coming across from the corporate sector, people from the same social milieu as himself. And a lot of these circumventions of democracy have to do with cronyism between Key and Joyce and those in the corporate sector.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with our second issue tonight. Charter schools were passed through Parliament this week, while the report into the jaw-dropping incompetence of the Ministry of Education Novo Pay fiasco left large questions like, what the bloody hell were they thinking? What will be better or worse for education? Novo Pay or charter schools? Colin, would Jesus have gone to a public school or would he have gone to a charter school?
I have no idea.
Now that's a really
mate.
good question.
No, seriously,
yep,
I
yep.
have no idea. I don't even think they had public schools
yeah.
back in those times. I don't think there's any competition in this question. We know Nova Pay has been a fiasco.
Yes.
However, charter schools, the jury's still out on that. We've only just given them the go-ahead on a trial basis. The evidence is unclear. Sometimes they work, sometimes they fail. We have no idea what difference that's going to make yet.
Your religious backers, the people who support the Conservative Party,
if we have some,
if
please, where are you? No.
They would be supportive, very supportive of charter schools, would they not?
I think charter schools reflects a wide range, doesn't it? If I read correctly, you've got special focus like sports or business interests, certain training and business areas. You've got religious sector.
And then corporate.
And then you've got corporate, people who want to sponsor it. You've also got special needs. Some schools set up for people, say, with learning disabilities, dyslexia. I know you can have charter schools that focus around that. I think a bit of choice doesn't hurt. I'm pleased we're doing it on a trial basis, though. It'll give us a chance to assess whether charter schools it pays off or not.
Would you, as the leader of the Conservative Party, would you support a charter school that had in its curriculum creationist science teaching the earth being 6,000 years old?
I don't think
think
that's the issue. Either you are going to give charter schools the go-ahead or you are not, and the accountability rules around that have to be discussed. I'm not writing those. I think overseas they do allow quite a broad spectrum, and that is sometimes that pays off, sometimes it doesn't. What I do think is if we do have charter schools that say set up, for example, to encourage sports, then we shouldn't judge them entirely on their academic achievement. They may underperform slightly on academic achievement, but if they produce great sportsmen and women for our country, then I would like to see a bit more latitude given to understand that their charter, that their focus said we're not just about the grades. So I'd like to see a bit of latitude.
Would that also be extended to religious schools? If you're doing well in theology, you shouldn't be judged if you're doing really poorly in science.
I don't think the issue is that clear cut with religious schools, because I think we have integrated Catholic and religious schools.
We do have
right
integrated,
now.
that's right.
And I'm assuming that they have
a curriculum is still very much overseen by the Ministry of Education.
I think they still have special focus, don't they?
Yeah, you're allowed to have a religious class,
And so I would expect that with charter schools you'd see the same sort of thing, where you've got some accountability back to curriculum, back to educational achievement, but you're allowing more latitude in who might administer school and sort of the principles on what they're missing. More choice can't hurt us, provided that we gradually assess it, which is what we are doing.
Wayne, as a doctor, as a lecturer, as an academic, what are your concerns for charter schools being able to teach religious quackery instead of science?
Well, I think there should be a comprehensive curricula which is secularly based, and the principles of secularity as the gap between church and state, and that there shouldn't be a conflation there. So if we were getting curricula which was going against that principle, I'd be a bit concerned. But hey, I'm a Democrat, and I think there should be alternatives to the state system. But the problem I have is just how much latitude these charter schools will have. For example, a really big issue is teacher registration. Now, I don't think that any charter school, no matter what its philosophy, should be able to opt out of common teacher registration rules, because isn't there a public concern about the ethics of some teachers, you know, in the care of young people and so on and so forth? I don't want to rehearse those cases from Northland and so on. But I mean, that's just one issue, which is a kind of a litmus test, if you will, where if you give charter schools too much latitude, then I think they're absolving themselves from broader public responsibilities to have a registered workforce.
Is it also concerning that much of this, the transparency is going to be obscured because these charter schools are entering into business arrangements, and that's all got to be hush-hush?
Yeah, you put your finger on it, transparency. It's really, really important. You have to know what's happening in schools in order to resolve your difficulties and so on.
Isn't that the point of the charter, though? It will outline exactly on what basis what the charter is, or the undertaking of that school is. And if they fail to be true to that, then my understanding is that's part of the assessment. Yeah. Right. So they get approved on the basis of being, hey, we're transparent, here's what we're about. See, I think we're probably on a similar page. It won't hurt to have more choice. We just have to be quite careful. I too think teacher registration is part of the important assessment here. I think we've got to be careful about who else might get into a classroom. Someone with a little bit of training can still have a special focus, but it won't hurt them to have had some training.
Colin, NovaPay has been a fiasco.
It has.
If National throw you a lifeline in Rodney, you could well be in cabinet. If officials bring you a report with the same type of bureaucratic double talk, would you probe them, or would you take them at their word? Stephen Joyce says he takes them at their word.
Look, this would have gone very differently if I'd been involved in the process. I think most people know that I run successful businesses. You don't run successful businesses by having open-ended contracts where people just, if they mess up, they just charge you more money. And I think we've spent an extra, 25 million, nearly 25 million over the estimate. Now, that would be unacceptable in a business. In government, it's like, well, we've got deep pockets, keep going. There'd been too many problems in the administration of this, and I think it needed commercial brains. It needed to be treated very differently. I think Trevor Mallard was the guy that originally put the recommendation forward. I don't have a problem with the necessary where we went with this, but the way it's been managed has not been satisfactory. And look, Stephen Joyce got involved at the beginning of this year, and the only reason I think he got involved was it was such a mess that they brought in Mr. Fix-It. And to be fair, I think he's got it back on track now, but we've still got this thousands of backlogs of queries and problems that are unresolved. So really, it is very detrimental to. I think we lost some good people.
So if you were in a position of overseeing this, if you had these documents brought to you and you saw all these little caveats at the end, oh well, maybe it's not going to go so well. Where would you have stepped in? Would you have gone back and said to the officials, well, I actually want an explanation of this? Or would you have signed off?
I think the moment that original timeline wasn't kept to, which is well before the product was rolled out, the moment the original timeline wasn't kept to, that's when serious questions needed to be asked. Not the, oh, well, it's got a few problems, let's send it through and hope it works. That never pays off, the I hope it works system. I think he had to ask serious questions earlier on. But we don't have enough commercially smart people in Parliament, frankly.
Wayne, teachers' unions warned the government that NovaPay would be a train wreck. Why isn't Heke Parata resigning?
Well, let's go back to June 2012 when it was rolled out, and that was signed off by the Associate Education Fellow Craig Foss and Parata and Bill English.
Yes.
So he's got a bit to be responsible for here too. Senior cabinet members can't scuttle away from this.
Right.
Now the thing is, Parata and English, they signed up to this and they knew there were glitches in the system when it was originally rolled out. So bring Joyce in is just a way of taking the heat off Parata because the Prime Minister wants her there no matter what. And I think it's a clear abrogation of ministerial responsibility. And Labor and the Greens are quite right to put the heat on.
I want to disagree with that. I think bringing Joyce in was the first smart thing the government did with this.
It's just political management.
Did it take heat off Heke and did it take heat off Ability?
Sure it did, but it actually got some solutions as well. I mean, I agree, it should never have been signed off, and I think each of those three ministers who signed off on it should be held accountable. But in reality,
look at all the money they're wasting.
Putting Joyce onto it actually ensured that it got the priority. I mean, he has the ability to step in there and knock heads together. He did that. He managed to get this over the line for them, and frankly, I think that was a huge relief.
Let's accept that, but should Heke Parata be resigning? This is on her watch.
She should be accountable. I'm disappointed we lost people like Leslie Longstone and others. because I think if you talk about damage to education, part of the damage that this has caused is we've lost some good people.
Is Hekia being kept safe and protected because she is seen as a next possible leader? There are factions within the National Party who want her over Judith Collins.
Oh no, the government just doesn't want the furore that would result if she did resign.
Yeah,
Just
right.
as simple
Final
as
question
that.
to both of you: what will be better long term for education, charter schools or Nova Pay?
Look, better. You
Yes.
mean we're
Or better? Well, who's going to be better? Who's going to be worse?
I think charter schools could turn out to be something worth having. Nova Pay, finally, it's over the line, but gee, for the damage it caused, very detrimental.
Oh, it's about a jaw. I mean, my comments on charter schools need to be attenuated by the fact that there are underlying agendas with charter schools, which is to fragment the public education system. So that's really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
So I suppose on a balance of negative utilitarianism, it might come out slightly worse than Nova Pay.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. Peter Dunn has been served a double blow this week. His party United Future has fallen beneath the 500-member threshold, and Winston Peters has increasingly used any opportunity under the protection of parliamentary privilege to allege Dunn is the source of the GCSB leak. Colin, firstly, how many members does the Conservative Party have?
Members and supporters now
Yep.
about 5.5, and actual paid up supporters well over 3.
Okay, you're sweet. If Winston is successful at repositioning himself as a possible coalition partner for Key, does National need the Conservative Party?
Well, look, we're going to go there whether National need us or not, frankly. I think this is very interesting because Peter's polling has been steadily declining, ours has been steadily rising. It won't be long before we pass him, and that's our goal, frankly, to be 4th highest polling. I think Peters smells two things. One is he's got some fear here. He's got some concerns. His popularity is declining. It does matter to him. He is in Parliament. He should be doing better. He smells an opportunity here, and he is one of the world's great opportunists, so he's taking it. Dunn is weak. His lifeboat is sinking, and Peters is there firing more holes into it if he possibly can.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting. The Prime Minister has not defended Peter Dunn. He didn't come out and say, oh, I'm going to have Peter Dunn here next election. He came out and said, I'm going to work with ACT and the Conservatives in New Zealand first. The fact Dunn was not in that equation, I would be worried if I was Peter Dunn.
Wayne, could this be the end of one of Parliament's great survivors? And does it suggest that for the 2014 election that there won't be any centre political ground?
Yes, it could be the end. I'd give him a less than 50-50 chance of getting his electorate back next time.
Wow.
I'd say that Colin's got a bit of spin going here because I think the Conservative Party and New Zealand First are competing for some of the same voters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just sort of put that into the mix.
Yeah.
Look, what Winston's doing here is two things. One, it's very hard for a smaller party to maintain media profile in a mid-election cycle, so it's all about that. But it's also about the fact that Winston would like to be the kingmaker himself.
Yep.
And far better to do that if Peter Dunn is not there. So
Right.
it's just it's a simple political calculation on his part.
Final question to both of you. Will Dunn run in 2014?
I think it will be his intention at this stage, but I would not rule out a change of the guard. I mean, look, but maybe Peters and Dunn should both be thinking about post-election plans at this point in time.
Is Dunn will he run in 2014?
I'm not sure, but if he did, I think his chances are probably worse than they have been on other occasions. He keeps surviving though, doesn't he?
He does. He does.
You
Like a
can't
political-
rule either of them out on that basis, can you?
Let's wrap the show with a final word. Wayne, what is your final word this week? Please?
Oh, I'd like to go back to Peter Dunn again. You started off this segment by saying that he hasn't got enough registered voters, right? Well, I seem to remember back in the 2002 election campaign where the word worm was used.
That's
and
right.
Dunn did really well, didn't he? Just by using the word common sense all the time. Well, what's common sense about allowing your registration party members to go run down so you don't get the money and resources you need to be a parliamentarian? That's not very common sense, is it?
No more votes in the centre ground?
Oh, it's too early to say. If you wanted me to guess, I reckon we've got a reasonable chance of a deadlocked result next time. I think it's going to be very close.
Yeah. Your final word this week, Cole?
Final word, I think the question is, are our politicians listening to us and doing what we want them to do? I think the answer to that is no. Hey, over 92% of us tough on law and order, didn't happen. Over 82% of us, let's have less MPs, didn't happen. Over 87%, let's can the anti-smacking law, didn't happen. I think if we had had a referendum on state assets, it would have said stop. We need binding referenda. That's why you need the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Wayne. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. The Press Council's stance on the cartoons by Al Nisbet can't pass without comment. In the wake of the backlash, the Press Council were very quick to have their mouthpiece on the telly, telling everyone who would listen that they supported free speech and the right for the cartoonist to offend, which is all well and good, but rewind to 2003 and that wasn't what the Press Council was saying at all. When the New Zealand Herald sacked Malcolm Evans for a cartoon that offended Israel, the New Zealand Press Council weren't arguing for free speech or the right to offend. Oh no, they limply acquiesced to the Herald's decision and went as far as supporting the Herald not printing letters criticising the sacking. So, if the cartoons offend Māori and Pacific Islanders, the Press Council is all free speech and the right to offend. When the cartoons offend Israel, it's silent support and a green light to censor any criticism. Glad the New Zealand Press Council cleared that up for us. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on